Gather around, kiddos, and let me tell you a tale. One of loss and failure, devastation, desperation, and most importantly, of hope and perseverance. It all started on January 2nd, fresh out of my New Year's celebration of silently spending the night in bed trying to sleep at the late time of 10 p.m. for work the next day, and scrolling through the itch.io jam page did not feed my addiction. I promise, it's not an addiction. I can stop it anytime. Anyway, there I was on Itch, where I saw this jam starting on that very day of January 2nd, and without any hesitation, I joined it thinking, it's a month long, how bad can it be? So, here's how it started. The jam in question was the Boss Rush Jam, which is a biannual game competition where developers are tasked with creating an entire game based on the concept of a boss rush. Oh, you don't know what a boss rush is? Well, let me enlighten your tiny little brain. A boss is a big guy with a lot of health, and a rush means fast. Ergo, boss comes at you fast. No preamble, you just get right into the combat. A good boss rush usually has a few bosses one after another with absolutely no in-between fights with common enemies. Now that we're on the same page, let's continue. The grand theme of the jam was boss rush, but there was still a sub-theme that was announced when the jam went live. Hilariously enough, the theme was going to be the same as the last GMTK jam that I partook in, but Mr. Mark Brown released his jam first, so they had to change it. They chose to keep it simple with the theme of spin. The theme was locked in, and I was really excited for it. It was open to hundreds of interpretations. Do your ability spin? Arena? Boss itself? Who knows? Despite all the possibilities, I wasn't actually locked into analysis paralysis because for the first time ever, I wasn't alone. I started the jam with a pitch to a friend of mine who wanted to learn pixel art. So I asked her if she wanted to spend a month in the trenches with me learning absolutely anything she could, while I spent as much time as possible on just pure gameplay. She was on board for it and we jumped right into planning. We both have a large fascination with magic and wizards. Spoiler alert, we're nerds. So we knew that we wanted to make a game where you'd be locked into a high-octane magic duel. What we didn't know was how we were going to make that happen. In the end, we decided that the most fun option was some type of Wheel of Fortune roulette system that selected your spells for you, and you had to make do with what you got randomly. At the time, we knew that the game we wanted to make was very similar to the hit game Wizard of Legend, but hey, it's our game, and we're meant to be learning, so who cares if it's a blatant ripoff? I hopped right into streaming the game on the first day of the jam. Check out the link in the description. I need more friends. And started developing the movement system as well as an early spellcasting system, while my friend was still waiting to get back home to start working. Most of the early clips of development only happened during streams, which was definitely the first major issue of this project. I fell into a trap of thinking that since I had a month, I actually had so much extra time since I usually partake in jams that only last a single weekend long. I figured that as long as I was working on it for at least 3 hours a day on stream, then I had more than enough time to figure things out. What I didn't realize at the time was that I was more excited about the idea of working on a new game rather than the game itself. So I was full of a ton of motivation for a shiny new project without actually having any passion for the project itself. So for the time being, I chugged away at making things. By the end of the first week, my friend was back and was able to start working on pixel art. The first piece of art, the player character. This was issue number 2. When you're working with someone who has no experience, you need to be very clear in the language that you use. Other people can't see inside your head and just know instinctively what you mean by things. We had been discussing different looks for the player, and I had mentioned how a cat person would be cool and fit the fantasy vibe that we're going for, but several times throughout the conversations, I simply referred to the player as a cat, and my friend definitely got mixed up a little bit. They sent me their first piece of art, and it was just a cat in a sitting position fully facing the camera as if the game was a 2D side-scroller. Once again, a failure of communication on my part. I decided that rather than sending her back to redo it according to my vision, we just fully send the style, as this was just about as much as them learning as it was about me feeding my definitely not an addiction. The player was now a cat. I get the art into the game and do a little bit more work on player movement, adding things like a dash as well as tweaking basic things like player speed. Once again, all this work was done only during a 3-hour live stream after I got home from my full-time job, and I'm definitely feeling it at this point. A week in, and I already can't focus on the project. I just have a basic player done, with the most complex thing I made being the dash itself, and a simple health system. I spend more time talking with chat than I do actually working on the game, and I feel my motivation for the project very quickly slipping away. During this time, my friend has finished all of the player art and has now started to tackle the first boss, a giant slime that we were both very excited about. She really hits the flow state while working on this boss due to the simplicity of it, and we start working on all the different attacks and states that it's going to have. We're now about 2 weeks in, and I have finished a simple modular spell system and a really unpolished wheel that I didn't touch for the rest of the project. You know, the main mechanic of the game. If you're following so far, you can definitely see the pattern here. I, like Icarus, put on my waxed game dev wings believing myself to be one with the sky and let my hubris take me too high up. Now with no motivation and a project that was definitely becoming more and more daunting as I approached the end of the month, I definitely was feeling the sun scorching my wings as the wax melted. I was falling. I wish I could tell of a tale in which I didn't let this be the end of me and the end of the game. And while it wasn't, reality isn't as pretty as it is in the stories. One of the major problems that new developers face is motivation and letting it dictate how they handle their projects. I was riding the high of a shiny new game and a shiny new game jam that I was so certain I'd make the next indie gem on. But when my motivation came crashing down, so did my work on the project. I didn't let discipline pick up the slack after my motivation left me. But, despite it all, I chose to continue through with the project because I had some help from a friend. Specifically, the friend who was still making art for the game. I couldn't just give up on a game when she's here working so hard, trying her best to actually make a first game. So I put on my big boy pants, grabbed the leftover scraps of my wings, and flapped as hard as I could. If I was falling, I was going to make damn sure I was going to survive the landing. I focused up and started working off stream where I knew I was more productive, completely finishing up the first boss with a state machine to dictate all the different attack patterns. I added a bunch of early polish to make attacking and getting hit feel as good as possible, and then spent a day working on an entire spell inventory system. The game was actually in a state that was playable from start to finish. Sure, it was only a single boss fight, but it was playable and actually looked like a game. All it needed was content. Luckily for me, I based a lot of my systems on Terraria and how they handle weapons. Everything in Terraria is super modular and allows modders to literally add new items into the game with a single script. Every item inherits from a base item script, letting the new items override that specific AI. I added several new spells, each with unique behavior that completely changes how you play the first boss fight, and also added a loop so after you beat the first boss, you could just restart and try the fight again with a new spell. Unfortunately, by this point, my friend had completed what was planned to be the big final boss and started the next boss, and I had practically given up, burning myself out completely to get the game to be a complete experience. Even worse, there was only a day or two left and I had a full-time job to deal with. At the end of the experience, I was unable to get even a second boss into the game, and it was entirely my own fault. The good news was that when I released the game, as incomplete as it was, people really enjoyed what was there and all expressed how they want more content. So hey, who knows? Maybe it'll be a project I pick up again someday. But that day is not today. I need a nap. And with that, kiddos, our story comes to a close. Lessons were learned and tears were shed. They say that you never stop learning in game development, and that's something I definitely felt by the time that I finished this project. If there was any large takeaway from this game jam, it's that you just can't rely on motivation to be able to do all your work. Sometimes it does come down to discipline and a healthy dose of expectation. I just want to give out my sincerest thanks to my friends Renea for working on all the character art. Her Twitch will be in the description so you can support her there, as well as my editor Solid, who has done an amazing job on not just this video, but the last one too. And finally, another big thanks to my friend Wes for coming in at the last second to make these super cute portrait arts for the cat and the host. I will be back here soon with a new big project that I'm not quite ready to reveal yet, but I'm super excited about it. You can play the game right now on itch.io and tell me what you think. Oh, and while you're down there, you might as well like the video and subscribe to my channel. I love making content for you guys and would love to keep this up for a while longer. That's all for now. Bye bye!